Hello everyone, welcome to another day in the clown decade. You know how it goes, things are getting worse before they get better. And this is the 8th episode in the Reacting to Extreme Britain series, so I don't think we need introductions anymore. Let's just see what Politics Joe has to ask about men's mental health. Take it away, Ed Campbell.
I would suggest that people are working too hard, too long for too little. And with a shortage of housing and a cost of living crisis, you know, that combination is bound to have serious mental health effect.
This may be viewed as a controversial take by me, but I actually think men in a position where they are faced with adversity to that degree actually should be thriving. But we're not. We are suffering quite badly with mental health. I think actually in overall numbers women report worse mental health than men, but in terms of men's mental health, it's a worse degree of mental health. Men commit suicide more, for example, which I'm sure is true throughout history anyway. But I think we've got another issue in that it's not treated properly, but I'm sure we'll get into that later in the video. But again, even when it comes to the cost of living crisis and things like that, yeah, people don't have as much disposable income as they maybe had in the 90s, sure, but everyone seems to also forget that technology has come so far that it's cheaper to actually get supercomputers in everyone's hands more than ever. So, again, another controversial take, but I've been saying recently that if you're in poverty, quite typically that just means you're behind on a few bills, including your iPhone. Not that you are a completely malnourished mess who is on the verge of dying. We don't have too many cases of malnourishment in the UK, and typically it's not due to food being too expensive that people are malnourished. But I'm guessing we'll get into all that as the video progresses.
As far as I can see it, it's a little bit one-sided really at the moment in regards to favouring women. Everything you see on TV, a lot of broadcasters are female as well versus men.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. I mean we recently had an entire overground line being named after the Lionesses, who've won one European Cup, or was it a World Cup? No one even really remembers. That's the funny bit about it. Nobody really cares about the Lionesses. It's only a few select fans, and obviously that's probably in the millions of people, but the general population really don't care about women's football. Aside from when the World Cup was done in Qatar, my family always host World Cup and European Cup finals if England make it that far, which, okay, that's a rare occurrence, but when it came to the women's, nobody cared. Nobody asked for it, nobody in the family really talked about it, unlike, obviously, when the men got to I think it was the European Cup finals a few years ago, just post-COVID, and it was the biggest sporting news for years that I can remember. But this is how a lot of men genuinely feel, that when very few men make genuine accomplishments, then we can celebrate men, but the rest of the time it is literally all about women. I mean, I've recently had to enable adverts on YouTube again because I'm not paying for YouTube Premium, and even then, you see adverts, and it's all targeted at women. I think AXA recently had an advert where, again, like the Barbie movie as well, they're acting like we still live in the 50s and 60s America or something like that. They're acting like women have only just been able to get credit cards by themselves. But you ask normal people like this guy, and yeah, everyone's noticed. No, we're way beyond that. We're actually... we've normalised sexism against men. I mean, to be fair, sexism between both sexes was always normalised, but we have made it effective... Well, it is effectively a criminal offence, especially in Nottingham, to be misogynistic, which is just absurd. And then you see, women in STEM, women in everywhere. I remember as I was leaving uni, the Feminist Society started putting all around the university campus, like, oh, here's how women in the past were kicked out of science. And they used the example of, like, Rosalind Franklin, who, for people who don't know, all she did was, I think it was, I can't remember the details, but effectively got the image of a microscopic image of a DNA sequence, which was provided as evidence for, I can't remember the two guys' name, but for the guys who discovered that DNA was a double helix. And the thing is that I remember seeing that, and I actually went to look up the original scientific journal article about DNA being a double helix, and they do everything they need to reference that Rosalind Franklin got this picture for us. So in no way was she kicked out of history or anything like that, but this is the lie that absolutely everyone can see, and it's kind of no wonder that men aren't taking that particularly well.
Who's someone in kind of the public life that you think young men should try and emulate?
Nelson Mandela.
I mean, let's be absolutely fair here. I am assuming that she means Nelson Mandela after he finally got out of prison and decided that violence was not the answer, because he was actually an active terrorist before that. And from what I understand about South Africa, his time before he was in prison are what a lot of African politicians are trying to emulate, rather than the post-prison one of being a more democratic and non-violent activist. But, I mean, it kind of does speak volumes that it's who should people be more like, or who should men particularly be more like in the modern era, and they decide not even to choose someone who's British.
Men in this country are in crisis. Our mental health is in the toilet, and all the pints of Madry and OnlyFans subscriptions in the world just aren't going to fix it.
I mean, the second point there is really speaking to an issue we are having, yes. Open access to internet porn. I used to not think it was too bad because, you know, when I was younger and had access to the internet, of course I had access to it, but I didn't really see it affecting me negatively in the way that a lot of people said it would or could. And obviously that's all anecdotal evidence, but then you start actually getting onto social media and things like that and seeing studies into this, and yes, internet porn is actually very bad for men. I'm one of the lucky ones where it seems to not have affected too badly. But then OnlyFans is even worse than that in an awful lot of ways, because OnlyFans, they can make personalised content and it feels exclusive. And if you see something exclusive, well, that's, you know, one step closer to marriage, because obviously marriage is this exclusive institution for exactly two people. And if you're not having a good time finding a girlfriend and you want some exclusivity, well, just give this random girl £20 a month and, well, she'll show you all her bits. And that's filling the void of men of wanting something exclusive with a woman, but it's doing it in the complete wrong way, because it's not really exclusive, because an awful lot of them are leaked anyway. And it is not fixing your problem of not being able to find a girl, which, you know, if you're having trouble with that and watching this video, literally just do any sort of project on yourself. Going to the gym could help, but I think doing something a bit more practical and with tangible results are much better. My side project is literally this YouTube channel, and, well, if you ever watch any of the streams I'm in, you will hear my girlfriend in the background sometimes.
If we are remotely serious about finding a solution, it's going to take some seriously big thinking.
And again, this might be controversial from me. I think it's actually quite simple. Men just want to do things. Men, more important than that, men want to feel productive. That's what men's heads are geared towards. That's why they have typically been the provider, because it's like crack cocaine to us. An example from my life is that my girlfriend is very much into horses, and we recently brought our own foal as well. But there's plenty of times where I've had a long day at work and my girlfriend's been quite ill, and she says, oh, can you go and sort out the horses? And it takes like half an hour or something like that, and it's a bit of a drive, but something as simple as bringing 2 horses into a field, mucking out their stables, giving them feed and all that, making sure the horses are fit and healthy, and my girlfriend is happy because of that, you know, there's a tangible result to my work, it's done wonders for my mental health. I'm not going to go into it too much here because my Richard Dawkins videos has an awful lot of atheists in the comment sections, but I also started going to church since I moved to Wales 7 months ago. I can actually actively feel my mental health improve just through that as well. In short, I think there is actually a religious aspect to this as well, but again, I suppose as people start answering these questions, we can get into that. Oh, and also, if you're interested in seeing pictures of the horses that me and my girlfriend own, we typically put some pictures of them into our personal Discord, link down below. Just FYI, you have to insult me when you join that server. Just call me a nonce or something, really. If you watch my content enough, you know that I can take any insult.
So that's why I've come to Showroom by Sea, the most miserable place in the UK. According to the ONS, people here rate their happiness at just 6.16 out of 10.
I'm going to be honest, I'm not even sure what that means. I guess at least it's above a 5, but if the most miserable place in the UK is like 6 out of 10, I'm not going to lie, that's not too bad.
That's a fair bit less than the national average of 7.39.
It's what, 15% lower than the national average? Statistically, that's not that much lower. I suppose it depends on standard deviations and all this, but if the unhappiest place is less than 20% more miserable than the national average, yeah, that's pretty good going.
So people here must know a thing or two about how to cope.
I mean, no, not necessarily. They might be the most miserable place because they have terrible coping strategies. That was very much a non sequitur, but that's exactly what I expect from politics, Joe.
I'm here to find out if they've got any bright ideas about how to cheer us all up.
Go on then, let's have some pearls of wisdom from this high street.
How do you think we fix men's mental health?
I mean, that's a laugh of a guy that knows he has to say something about these strategies to get an equal society over the past 30 years or so. And, well, you know, I've been doing this for 5 years. Obviously, I agree. The insane way to try and get equality between the sexes is definitely making men feel worthless.
Even though we're in the 21st century, they still feel that it's somehow unmanly to display any kind of difficulty.
Well, men are becoming more feminised, and in so, amazingly, they're becoming more neurotic. And that's why we're having a bit of a men's mental health issue. I think genuinely teaching stoicism and teaching men to be stoic is an absolutely fine way to go about life, and genuinely seems to be the best strategy for improving men's mental health. Because all stoicism really says, it doesn't say don't care about anything or you can't do anything. The shortest summary I think I can come up with stoicism is there are things in your life you can do nothing about, so just accept them. Do take control of the things you can take control of in your life, though, and try and get them in the best place that you can. And again, that's what I've been doing over the past 2 years or so. And what has massively helped with that is obviously having a girlfriend, because, you know, it's the old adage of women civilise men. Well, women also give men a purpose. And I suppose this is another thing, the complete breakdown of having just normal relationships between men and women. It's really affecting men's mental health. I mean, I am definitely happiest when I am in relationships, but it took me till about 20 to be in a proper one, and you had to learn how to be by yourself and do your own things. And my parents really helped with that before I ever got into a relationship. You know, they were having me do 4 sports a week, and I think my favourite one of all time was karate. Working towards getting a black belt in karate, nothing makes you feel more competent than that, trust me. But thinking that men just need to be open about their emotions, again, you're treating men like defective women, and men are not women.
I mean, I think it's a good thing that women have got more equality, and that has obviously helped me in my career and what I did. But I think in some ways that has maybe made men feel not as needed as they might have been in the past, because women are so independent, and I think that's a good thing. But I think you need to get a balance.
There is a TikTok and YouTube channel that I've been quite a fan of recently called Ho Math. That's H-O-E Math. He's American, obviously it is maths, but that's by the by. And he reacts to a lot of women on TikTok, and one thing he is trying to get into the heads of women is that they're not finding an awful lot of men attractive because of, yes, this ability to be independent, which effectively turns the women into the man of the house. And if they've turned into the man of the house, well, they're going to be depressed in 2 ways. I mean, yes, they are independent, and as this woman is saying, she doesn't want to say that there's problems with that, but there does appear to be problems with that. Because a lot of women, you know, we've all seen the TikToks on Twitter and whatever of women complaining that they're commuting 2 hours a day to work 8 hours to then come home and basically not have a life. And men can deal with that slightly better than women, especially if they are providing for a woman or for a family, because even if they're not, it doesn't take a lot for men to be happy by themselves. We've all seen the picture of the apartment of men where it's just a chair, a video game, and some beer. And that's all I need to be happy for an evening. Women, they need a bit more. They need sociability, and they are not social hours when you are spending 12 hours a day effectively working, because commuting is part of your work day. But this is the problem with treating women and men as equal in the workplace. I mean, obviously pay them the same for the same job, no one has an issue with that. But there's a reason that women are working less hours. It's because they do want to be more sociable, and they'd rather be, decorating the house or looking after kids or pets if that's the case. But Home Math also makes the point that they tend to get government benefits more than men do, whether that's child support or any other type of benefits. And that's made it so that they don't need men as much for, the more resources that they accumulate, because men used to accumulate more resources, partially because of the wage gap, but also partially because women weren't encouraged to get girl boss careers like they are now. And I mean, for some women, things like that work. My sister is a HR manager, and she absolutely loves her job. Obviously, she's job hopped quite a lot, but when she managed to get her own house and then get a boyfriend who is soon to be her husband, and they both have plenty of time to socialise and do things with the house, again, they're noticeably happier. And she actually, I think, brings in more money than her to-be husband, but her to-be husband is also happy doing his job, fixing up cars, investing money into other cars, and having his hobby there that my sister absolutely loves him doing and seems to get involved in as well. And it's really nice to see. But this seems to be an exception to the rule, where most men are making more money than women, and you'll probably see in majority of successful relationships that being the case. But back to my point of women not really needing men anymore, well, that kind of ruins the kind of bell curve of men and women's worth in terms of resources. Women used to marry up in terms of resources, but now the bell curves are matched, and women still want to marry up in resources, but there's way less men. And effectively, if women aren't willing to be in a relationship with you, they effectively don't see you as people. Obviously, there's exceptions if, you're friends or family or something like that, but again, we've all seen the dating app statistics. Women only swipe right on about 20% of men. And, with men, they swipe on about half of women, meaning that 80% of men appear to be worthless to the average woman. And yeah, that's going to kind of affect your mental health. And trust me, I used to be in that 80% too. It's not great, but I had a pretty good foundation for being able to grin and bear it. A lot of men are just giving up on that, though.
My age people are bewildered as to why there is so much, when, to all intents and purposes, in our day at university or college, there wasn't.
Well, back in your day at university and college, I would not be shocked if the men outnumbered the women. I mean, at the moment, as we can see from Statista, when it comes to enrolling into higher education, this is for years 2018 to 19, we can see that women are outnumbering men in pretty much everything apart from postgrad research. And in postgrad research, it's pretty close to 50-50. Whereas if you look back to 1980, which I assume is around the time this guy went to college or university, men were enrolling at a rate of 43,000 and women were at 25,000. And again, as has been said by other people in this interview or Vox Pop, I think that's partially down to, people seeing the marketing. It's all marketed towards women these days, it feels like. And there seems to be this assumption that it's because, men have had it for years in the past, so they'll just assume they can get in. Well, the thing is that, Zoomers and Gen Alpha, they're not seeing that. And so they're actually finding it quite hard to know their place in the world. It depends on the school you go to as well. An awful lot of schools will basically ask you which university you're going to, which makes it very hard to say, I'm doing an apprenticeship or I'm going to get a job instead. But because it's all marketed at women and, there's loads of women in STEM stuff and things like that, that's actually signalling to men that they're not wanted there. And that's also going to affect their mental health. Because again, men want to feel productive, but in doing so, when they feel productive, that kind of a secondary effect is that they'll feel wanted, but then not feeling wanted is obviously going to negatively affect their mental health. So this guy might be unaware of all that, I don't know, but again, that's what I am seeing in my life.
As far as I can see it, it's a little bit one-sided really at the moment in regards to favouring women. Everything you see on TV, a lot of broadcasters are female as well versus men. So I don't know if there's opportunities are there still for as many men as there were before. But having an equal balance is quite nice. It's really good. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
This is happening quite a lot in this Vox Pop, and it shows how ingrained feminism is into people's minds. But a lot of people so far have well, about half of them, have pointed out a problem. You know, the woman saying, oh, equality, it's nice, isn't it? It's nice. Seems to be causing a lot of mental health problems, though. But it's nice we have equality. And then this guy, again, same thing. Seen a lot of women on the TV, a lot more than we used to. I get the feeling that that's because men aren't being given or offered the opportunities as much as women are. But, you know, it's nice. You know, equality's nice. Equality's nice. And no, we need to get past this. It's about time we realise that both equality of opportunity and equality of outcome, especially equality of outcome, are just nonsenses. They have caused way more issues than they have solved. And clearly the idea of fair that we have in the society today doesn't appear to be fair. Because while they seem to love equality of outcomes, one, it's impossible to even get that realistically, but they don't mean equality of outcomes. They just mean better outcomes for those lower on the progressive stack. They effectively want a trans black lesbian in charge of absolutely every institution in Britain. And even then, that's only going to be acceptable if she is a leftist. Or he if he's trans, I suppose. But I think we need to be a bit more kind of Chad no about all this. No, equality of outcome is horrific. I don't like seeing women broadcasters everywhere. Everyone who watches football that I know doesn't appear to like women pundits always having to be on the panels. But obviously the overall leftist zeitgeist says, oh, that's a sexist thing to say. And then, you know, they attempt to cancel people for it if they've got a big enough name, or, yeah, people will just stay quiet about it because they don't want to be cancelled. So again, we're probably going to see this get worse before it gets better, but don't worry, I think it's getting better in 2029, so we've got that to look forward to.
The workplace is mostly of men, although women nowadays are making headway in gaining equality, but if you can't provide for your family, you know, it causes men a great deal of depression and sadness, because there doesn't seem to be any alternative to work. If you know, there's just nothing around here really.
It's amazing how the average person really does seem to get that the best way to improve men's mental health is to allow them to be productive and providers. But literally every institution seems to go against that idea and just thinks, oh no, they just need to talk about their mental health. They just need to talk through it. Again, as if they're defective women. And this guy might have it right. This might be exactly why this particular area is one of the most depressing places to live, because women might not be happy because they're not being provided for, and men might not be happy because there aren't a lot of opportunities to provide for women. But I would have no doubt that Politics Joe's answer to this is effectively full-blown communism, i.e. just get the state to provide for everyone. Yeah, that'll improve men's mental health.
It's all service industry, you know, delivering food on motorcycles and bicycles, you know, working in supermarkets. You can't make enough money to provide for your family. That's the problem.
And I wouldn't be shocked if there were men in that area that are more than happy to make some sort of new business there, or at least somewhere else. But yeah, that's quite hard to do these days as well. And again, actually, that's thanks to policies that Politics Joe probably wants to see. Ridiculously high corporation tax. Landlords feeling the squeeze, because landlords isn't just housing, it's also allowing units to be rented for storefronts and things like that. It's quite common to see a lot of storefronts be decimated throughout the UK. All that seems to be able to run these days is American sweet shops and Turkish barbers, which are quite infamous for just being money laundering fronts. I mean, I know in my parents' village there is effectively kind of one small strip of shops, and the shops seem to be replaced kind of every couple of years. I know there's one particular sought-after unit that has a new restaurant there every 2 or 3 years or something like that, because the rents are just so extortionate. I mean, they live in a posh area, don't get me wrong, but you're also seeing it in poorer towns. That I can't remember exactly who made the video, but there was just a guy who walked through Stoke. I was just like, this feels like a third world country, because we can't open anything, and there's just rubbish down all these alleyways that no one can be bothered to pick up. And I mean, that's going to make people feel depressed as well. Although, to be fair, this Shoreditch by Sea place, it actually seems fairly clean, so we can't blame dirty streets for the depression here, I suppose.
A lot of male-specific happiness is a sense of, like, usefulness.
Yep, boom, correct.
I feel like gives you a lot of fulfillment. So if for whatever reason people feel that they are either useless or cannot provide, maybe cannot perform some sort of function, then that's what
leads to depression. Yeah, this guy takes a while to speak. I mean, this is certainly part of it, and I think I've done that point to death, but there's also the other part that people don't really talk about, which is just men are constantly shown to be evil throughout society. Because for some reason, feminism has taken women should be quite wary in the streets because there are some bad men out there into... And I don't even need to reference anything. Everyone just knows this is the case now. All men are evil and will do bad things to you. And if enough people are told that and enough women act like that is true, of course men are going to feel awful because women are constantly told that they're almost these fallen angel type archetypes where they are perfect, they are just brought down by men. And men, you know, we're told the myth of in the past they were the only people that could do anything, and they were the people bringing society down and holding women back, when it wasn't that men were trying to persecute women in the past. In fact, again, like a lot of women don't see 80% of men as people these days, society didn't really see 90% of men as people either. I mean, it's absolutely fair to say that men got the vote at the same time as women pretty much all over the world. But the myth that we have today is that, oh, men oppressed women throughout history. As if men weren't generally the providers and the protectors of women throughout history. Oh, who from? Yes, other men. But it's minority of men, and it's men that the society that you say was run by men thought, the average thing we should do to a rapist is hang them. I mean, if you don't see that as protecting women, I don't know what to tell you. But obviously that's their story. Men are just evil and oppressors. Like, of course that's going to make men feel awful.
Move to a service economy, and that's an excuse. If you're any kind of economy at all, you have to be manufacturing, at least in part, for your own economy.
I mean, could Britain be manufacturing more? Yes. I mean, there's the big argument at the moment about Tata Steel being shut down in South Wales. And I think it's fair to say that, you know, it is a criticism, and a fair one, I think, of Maggie Thatcher for allowing the not necessarily just the privatisation of industry. I think that was absolutely fine. I think the problem is that it should probably be owned by Brits. It probably shouldn't be foreigners owning our steel production and things like that, because the only incentive they have to keep things up and running is the profit margin. At least if it's a Brit, he's thinking, oh, I will try a bit harder to see if I can cut costs elsewhere to keep this going for the good of my countrymen. There's fair reason to believe there's good incentive there. However, we are still the world's 7th biggest manufacturer. We still do have industry. I know we still have industry. I make software for industry. So the issue I don't think necessarily is that we aren't manufacturing enough, although we could do more. The issue is obviously that we have a huge productivity, not decline, but it's certainly not increasing by any stretch of the imagination. And this can, for example, be seen in, you know, your average high street, as I mentioned before. A lot of them are just empty. You know, you have empty units that aren't making any money. That is a lack of productivity. You have entire, I believe they were council estates, but either way, housing simply not being used, and councils putting up facades on doors and windows to make it look like they are being lived in, or at least have life in there, but really behind the cardboard and PVC printed curtains there is, you know, a completely abandoned house. And then new builds are very, very difficult to actually purchase because of all the regulations around that. Effectively, we have regulated ourselves into tying our hands and feet together and then wondering why our economy is barely growing. And I think this is the fairer criticism of the UK, rather than we don't manufacture anything. No, again, we're still the 7th biggest manufacturer. We still have a decent, say, car manufacturing industry. But these are fairly specific areas of the economy. Overall, it is being held back. And what makes an economy run? I mean, sorry, feminists, a lot of the time it is men. Women drive it in the sense that they make the consumer decisions, but an awful lot of the time they're getting the money to make those decisions from men. And that is still true in the modern day, despite the fact you've got equal pay.
If society is causing a problem in mental health, you can do the best to alleviate those mental health problems by therapy for the people, or, you know, drugs that can help with mental health problems, but at the end of the day, if a societal situation is causing people to have these mental health problems, they keep being caused.
Yeah, this guy's absolutely right. Preventative action is better than treatment action. And again, I mean, I've never had therapy and I've never been on drugs to help with mental health, but I'm a little bit on Peter Hitchens' side, where I actually think we're in a state where those two things probably don't actually help that much. I mean, certainly with therapists, there is an economic incentive to, keep people coming back. And obviously they do have a code of ethics that they should follow, and sure, that's how they can get their licenses. But I mean, for example, I've been recently watching with my girlfriend, who is a bit of a normie, a show called Vanderpump Rules, and it's basically following the lives of 30-something LA normie bar owners and a group of friends, and pretty much every single one of them is constantly going to therapy. They always seem to be going to therapy. They always seem to be talking about their therapists. They always seem to be giving each other the, oh, this is how we cope. And they never really seem to say, oh, I used to go to therapy and I've got a lot better now. I mean, I've only seen, half a season of Vanderpump Rules, but also when my girlfriend is driving the car, we'll put podcasts of these people on as well. And they all talk about spirituality and how it makes them feel great, but they still have these therapy sessions. And I just went off one time when they were talking about it, just saying, look, these people talk about spirituality and meditating and, going to the park or whatever with their dogs and just thinking and they call it meditating. And I just said, look, these people want church. That's what they want. They want more guidance than they have. But they don't want to admit that, whether that's because they're American and that's cringe, or I don't know, Christianity is this thing that they all want to avoid, and instead of listening to some old guy tell them how to act or some 2,000-year-old book, instead they're going to a 30-something therapist to give them guidance on it instead. But then at the same time, half of them have been to Alcoholics Anonymous and have to believe in a higher power, so at the end of the day, they are still trying to get their guidance from someone else. I don't see why they don't go to church, or at the very least try something different than what they're doing, because as this guy says, they're just getting treatments for their symptoms rather than actually trying to get to the deep root of their problems, which, from what I can tell, an awful lot of their issues basically stem from the fact they're all hedonists. I mean, there was an episode the other day where one of the guys just said, look, everyone's cheated on each other in this group, and I was just like, that's not normal. And, if I've known cheaters in the past, I don't particularly like talking to them. I don't particularly maintain that friendship, because if they can't even stay loyal to the one person they're supposed to be loyal to throughout their life, how can I trust them? But hey, I suppose it's made them all millionaires, so...
Whereas if you can set up a society that causes less mental health problems, then obviously that is the better scenario.
I really hope they come back to that guy and ask him kind of what would be your ideal society, because I think he'd spend a lot of his time umming and ahhing and not really giving an answer, because I think his society will be quite based.
Masculine identity is quite hard because there's no fixed idea anymore. It shouldn't be, really, but it's very difficult for young men to have role models.
Again, it's the same thing. This is how deep-rooted feminism is in the psyche and culture of modern-day Britain. This woman has basically just said, men should probably have a fixed idea of what it means to be a man, and then says, wait, no, that's not feminist. No, there probably shouldn't be, actually. Everyone should be individuals and find their own way. No, seriously, I do mean this. There should absolutely be clear-cut rules in the zeitgeist of what it means to be a man, and saying, oh no, everyone can find their own way, is obviously just going to lead to people not understanding how to live their life. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of men. But also they're being incentivized to effectively not provide for women, or at least women are being incentivized to not have a man in their life, or at least need a man in their life. A lot of women seem to get embarrassed that if they, say, have to ask their boyfriend for money or something like that. Whereas in reality, an awful lot of men actually love hearing that. They love hearing that they're needed in that way, even if it's not necessarily to treat their wives or it's money they're not going to get back. They're fine kind of giving out a 2-day loan or something like that to a woman of a few quid or whatever. Again, men just want to be useful and they want to be productive, but they're being told in doing so they're being oppressive. And I mean, this woman also is saying that men don't really have a role model these days. I mean, that's absolutely true. I can't remember which actor it was, but when Jodie Whittaker took over as Doctor Who, one of the old Doctor Who actors said, you know, this is just... this is typical of the modern day era. We're taking away a role model from young boys. And yeah, sure, there are hundreds of episodes of Doctor Who being a good role model in the past, but it's conducive of the direction we were going. You know, we're barely getting any male role models these days in fiction, and I suppose this is part of the reason I want to write a book, so that I can make a decent male role model in the 20s, because I don't know who people would point out as a good role model. I mean, I suppose there's plenty in the Marvel universe, but even then, again, they're getting rid of them all. Who's head of the Avengers now that Captain America decided to stay back and stay with Peggy in the past? Well, it's a woman. It's Captain Marvel. And she's just a really, really annoying woman. And the same thing happened with Doctor Who. And then when they do make Doctor Who a man again, they make it unbearable to watch. I mean, obviously, it's an exaggeration to say there are no male role models, but as I say, what is the cultural touchstone? What is the ultimate male role model of the 21st century? And as this woman says, well, there aren't really any. It genuinely could have been Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher, but they ruined him in season 1, and then just kept kicking him while he was down in in future seasons. So you never know, maybe it will be someone in the Warhammer 40,000 show that Henry Cavill's producing. I mean, if we're going to have a good male role model in the modern era, it's going to come from Henry Cavill. We're just waiting on it.
Particularly if you have no male role model in your family. I'm a widow, but I've made sure that I have put very strong male characters in the frame, and I think that's important.
Yeah, actually, this is a point that I've not brought up yet. Fatherlessness probably isn't helping an awful lot of people. I mean, plenty of people have talked about it for years at this point, but yes, fatherlessness, absolutely detrimental to kids' upbringings. And again, that's not to say that you absolutely have to have a father in absolutely every situation. Again, one of my best friends, his father died when he was 7. You know, he's grown up to be kind of annoying, but he's grown up to be, you know, a competent man who's ended up moving to Bulgaria with his girlfriend, and he's working, providing, seems really happy. And he grew up with 2 sisters as well, by the way. He effectively grew up with 3 mothers. That is not a household I would have loved to have grown up in. But he's turned out pretty good, and that's probably in part to the fact that he did have decent male role models throughout his life. You know, there were family friends with male role models. You know, my dad was a male role model for him as well. And I don't know his history of mental health issues. I don't know if he had any. I wouldn't be shocked if he did have some. He seems to have trouble getting through the early stages of uni and even dropped out, but seemed to be much happier working. And on the side, effectively learning to code via self-teaching. And now he does work for a software training company, I believe, and he's doing really well for himself. Apparently all it took was him having a bad time at uni and dropping out and going his own way while being with his girlfriend. He wasn't MGTOW. But it just goes to show, given the opportunity, men can do great things, and he found his own opportunities, and it's pretty good of him. But not every man is resilient as he is. And absolutely, an awful lot of them will need consistent male role models. So I thank this woman for bringing that up.
I can't judge, obviously, women who are on their own. I couldn't judge that. I wouldn't judge that.
It depends why the woman is a single mother, I would say. I have friends that are nurses. I'm sure I say this quite a lot in these videos. But, every nurse seems to have an anecdote of women on maternity wards who are single mothers quite openly saying, I'm only having this kid because of the benefits that it gives me. And an awful lot of the time they either know who the father is and don't want them involved in the kid's life, or don't know who the father is at all. You can absolutely judge a woman for doing something as selfish as that. You know, how many single mothers that is the case with, I don't really know. But if it's a woman whose man walked out on them, or if it's a woman whose man died on them, something like that, yeah, absolutely fair. You can't judge single mothers for that, but that doesn't stop fathers being an important part of the family unit. And so, as this woman says, she has found other male role models to have in her children's life. That is absolutely fine and, second best case scenario. And as I say, from my anecdotal evidence, works. So, good on this woman, I say.
But it's very important to encourage boys and young men to go and find their goals and seek some sort of clarity about their direction, really.
Yeah, and as I say, women are the best way to do that. I think I've really upped my game and really went ahead with improving my career, improving my skills, and even focusing on YouTube, surprisingly, post being with my girlfriend. And having that kind of quite literal cheerleader and partner in your life to encourage you to do that and happy when they see you succeed, it's great. I mean, my girlfriend is constantly asking, when are we doing the next charity stream? Because she wants to get involved with this as well, and she wants to see productive things come out of it. So, it's going to be in a couple of months, I guess.
Who's someone in kind of the public life that you think young men should try and emulate?
So I wouldn't actually choose anybody at the moment. That sounds really negative.
Well, yeah, but it shows us the problem we have at the moment. Who are the good role models at the moment? I mean, I'd say Jordan Peterson, but with normies, that's really edgy to say. And even with right-wingers, a lot of them don't like him at the moment. Due to, partially due to his benzo addiction, partially due to some of his more, let's say, spicy takes. But, I mean, to be honest with you, I see all these as quite positive things because his journey, if you read his journey through taking benzos, it shows you, it's kind of a story of almost staring into the abyss and having your own family help you through getting out of that abyss. And then post that, just openly, saying to Destiny, why can't we compare Monday vaccine policy to Hitler? Which, whether he's right or wrong or not, isn't the point, really, of having a role model. It's the conviction with which he says it. And the reason I still think he is a good role model is because when he says that, he still thinks through the reason for it. But, it does make it hard to like him sometimes. I will admit that. But overall, I think he's still one of the better role models. But this is the thing, normies won't say that. Because we're at a point where, as this woman says, you can't have any rules for what it means to be a man, apparently. But then at the same time you can, and it basically is be a woman. And when you say be a woman to men, well, how are you supposed to get a male role model from that? You're not going to get one.
But I don't think there's anybody. Obviously, historically there have been, but not at the moment. I can't think of any.
I mean, it does show how bad things have got when normies can't even think of like the peak male role model. I mean, no wonder men are lost. We have absolutely nobody to follow, which is probably why I've found myself finding more purpose in life. One, having a woman in my life, and two, finding Christianity again. Because, say what you will about religion, but at least Christ was a good man.
Can you think of anyone that when you were younger you thought, that I want to be like that guy when I grew up?
Although I said I never liked football, when I was young, I come from Liverpool originally, it was always because Gary Lineker played for Everton. It was, for some reason, and I don't know why, it was Gary Lineker at the time, yeah.
I don't know much about Gary Lineker when he was younger. I just found it really funny that his role model was Gary Lineker back then, when he was younger, implying that now Gary Lineker's a bit of a tit, which he is. I find that really funny. I mean, it's really inducive to everything, isn't it? Gary Lineker goes woke, men don't like him as a role model anymore. I mean, is it surprising? All Gary Lineker does these days is whinge and moan on Twitter, and then at the same time get absolutely millions from the BBC for hosting in Qatar, where there's a load of social injustices that he would usually be complaining about, and certainly would complain about if they were happening in Britain. So of course people have gone off him like this guy.
I know, it's just one of those things I don't think I've ever told anybody, though.
I mean, that's quite a male typical thing as well. I think men are quite wary about telling people who they're effectively trying to emulate because, to seem extra intuitive and extra productive, we do like to pretend that we got to conclusions and to places by ourselves, but no, and a lot of the time it's society's help. But even then, I can't even think of a Monday footballer that people want to have as a role model. I don't know what it is. Again, it might just be the browbeating we have all seen from feminists against men. I mean, Even Marcus Rashford, I don't think is a terrible role model for kids, because he did do philanthropy work, and I think that is a good thing. But again, people just don't have these people at the forefront of their minds, because I guess because, again, everyone thinks it's supposed to be the government doing all this philanthropy work, whereas if individuals did it, we'd have statues up of them, because, they've done great work for the country. But we just don't have people like that anymore. And I think that's really a loss for the country.
What do you think of Gary Lineker now? Do you still think he's a cool guy?
No, I think he's massively outspoken and is probably using his ability to communicate with people to push his own agenda, which is one of those things that we can't really have. You should have free speeches, of course, right? But when you start becoming sort of counterculture, and in order to push an agenda that you have personally, I think is not right.
I don't think he's quite worded what he wants to say correctly there. I mean, for a start, the last thing that Gary Lineker is counterculture. Gary Lineker is the embodiment of the modern culture. But effectively what I think he actually wants to say is, Gary Lineker is talking an awful lot of nonsense that I completely disagree with, and I think is actually largely harmful for society, and I want him to shut up. But obviously acknowledges that free speech is a good thing, and Gary Lineker has absolute freedom to say as he likes. He just doesn't think it's useful to, say, call Suella Braverman a Nazi. Oh, but he didn't directly call her a Nazi. No, he just said that her rhetoric was like 1930s Germany. Which, how is that not calling her a Nazi?
What would you do to help men then who are feeling stressed, anxiety? What was one thing you would like to see change?
Well, I think more awareness about certain things, like, letting men talk more, I think is important.
Oh, again, the feminism, it's palpable. Like, men will talk about these things when they feel comfortable to do so. But yes, they feel uncomfortable in the first place because, sure, it is a sign of weakness, but saying it's okay to be vulnerable isn't the right thing. You've almost got to trick them into that mindset. And the way to do that is... I can't remember the details of it. It was a Chris Williamson video, but he said that there was... I think it's an Australian thing where it's like men's sheds or something like that, and it's literally just... It's a charity where men will literally just go to a shed and start doing woodwork or something like that together. And as they're doing the work, they'll start trusting each other and then talking, and then they'll start opening up a bit. And that's about as far as you can get men to go with opening up to each other. It's by also tricking them into... Well, not tricking them into trusting each other. They obviously trust each other, but tricking them into being vulnerable. And they will only do that, from in my experience anyway, sometimes with their wives and girlfriends, but a lot of the time when they're just doing things with other men. I used to play snooker with my best friend, and that's when he has told me when things are troubling him. And we're always thankful to each other when we're, playing snooker and just chatting there when we're alone. And that's what men need to do. You need these male-only spaces. Like, this is the thing. The destruction of the male-only space has probably absolutely ruined men's minds. Because now they have to feel like they act like women, and their mind is telling them, this isn't right, though. And what's even men's answers? Well, because they're so ingrained with feminism that they see everywhere, they think, I'll just get them to talk more, have them go to therapy or whatever. It's like, no, these are very feminine ways to deal with these problems. It's not going to improve men at all, I'm afraid.
Having, you get those men badges as well, so letting people know, it's okay to speak up and talk, and having maybe groups for men to have certain discussions, whether it's, related to family life or whatever. But
this was a huge point Fight Club was making, though. Men being in a circle, being women, is emasculating. It makes them feel bad. Fight Club is unironically, a much better way for men to bond with each other and trust each other. It gets to a point in Fight Club, I know it's a fictional story, but it's really speaking to something real. They trust each other enough to effectively become a nationwide terrorist organisation. Now, I'm not saying becoming a nationwide terrorist organisation is a good thing. That is the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm saying that is what men will do when it gets to the point where they do just want to lash out. And trust me, getting men in a circle to talk about their problems isn't the way to do it. They will get in a circle and talk about their problems, they just need to be whittling and trying to make some things while they are doing it.
it is very, very sad to see so many men killing themselves at such a young age, more so than women, and I think it's like 3 times more than women. So there is a problem in there, but again, how to fix it, I don't know. But I think more awareness and more groups and more sort of platforms, and having probably more role models as well, good role models, I think are really, really important.
It's a thing I'm noticing more and more with normies. Yeah, they've realised that men don't have role models anymore. Who are our role models? I mean, again, as I say, Marcus Rashford would not be the worst person to cite for normies at the moment because of his philanthropy work, but philanthropy work doesn't really exist anymore. Everyone is being told that men who are in power are all evil, all of them, no exception, despite the exceptions. Because of, I guess, people like Boris Johnson, who... it's really overblown, the whole situation with him lying to Parliament, quote-unquote, and breaking the rules, and I mean, people will never see him as a good role model because of those sorts of things. But even the good men in Parliament who, despite, say, their voting record or anything like that, just the way that they present themselves and go about their business, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, a lesser-known one, Sir Graham Brady, Dominic Raab, these men don't do an awful lot wrong, really. But even they're not considered role models, and it's a really confusing thing about the modern world. I don't know why these politicians aren't seen as role models. I wouldn't be shocked if the Duke of Wellington was seen as a role model. I wouldn't be shocked if Horatio Nelson was seen as a role model. I mean, they must have been. We've got statues of them all over England. But this is the thing, who would we make a statue of the 21st century? I don't think people would even be happy with Tony Blair.
But finding solutions to mental health issues is something we need to debate in the House of Commons. Not that's not something to be discussed on the street. Really, we should be discussing it in the main political forum, which is Parliament.
I'm not blaming this guy specifically, but I really, really am getting fed up with this outlook. Oh, this isn't a solution for society to deal with. This is a solution for the House of Commons. Everything, and I mean this, every problem in public life, for some reason, all needs to be just handed over to some politician. House of Commons, your local council, I don't know. For some reason, people don't think that civilians, the individual, whatever, should have initiative. It's like they think they need to be cogs in a machine that needs to be directed by Parliament. The average Brit genuinely does just want fascism. Not socialism necessarily, fascism. They want to be told how to think by Parliament. They want the bureaucracy. Because people want their lives to be as easy as possible. And what's the easiest way to have your life as easy as possible? You have the House of Commons dictate to you how you live your life and what you do. And yet at the same time, everyone will say they hate politicians. It's crazy. And I suppose this is why it would be ideal if I do become a millionaire somehow, so that then I can just say, look, I want to do this charity work, I want to do this philanthropy work, I don't want to give it to the House of Commons. The only way I want to have any kind of talk with the House of Commons is, can you just get out of my way and let me do this? But people have the opposite view of instead, oh, the House of Commons should have all this. The rich, they don't know what to do with their money, just take all of that, have the House of Commons redistribute it, put it to where they see best. And at the same time, all these people will hate government. It makes no sense to me. But again, this is probably actually playing into the men's mental health crisis. They're not being told that they are allowed to take initiative and do things. They are being told that that is the job of someone else. And again, what's the main thesis of this video? Men like to feel useful. They're going to feel pretty freaking useless if they're told that everything useful they can do just needs to be given out to some nameless politician or institution. Good work.
But I would suggest that people are working too hard, too long for too little. And with a shortage of housing and a cost of living crisis, that combination is bound to have serious mental health effect.
Oh yeah, and what's your solution? Not have, random civilians, men, people find their own way through this murky water, let's say. No, just give it out to Parliament. They'll have the perfect answer and take absolutely every obstacle out of our way. Again, humans are never going to have a utopia. because they'll want to destroy it, they will hate it, they will want something interesting to happen, and the point of a utopia is that absolutely nothing interesting happens. Again, back to Vanderpump Rules and, that LA friendship group, why do they all cheat? Probably because their lives are so unbelievably easy that it just gives them some interesting conflict. The most recent episode, a couple who recently broke up because the guy cheated, and absolutely he shouldn't have done that. He's a piece of work for that. The ex-girlfriend, they're still trying to keep the friendship group, obviously to keep the show going, but either way, they're trying to keep the friendship going. But the woman in it is having absolutely none of it, and she is making a scene every time they are in the vicinity of one another. And he's just had enough of everyone hating him, basically, so he's past the interesting kind of conflict as a result of cheating on her. He's done with it, but no, he's got to deal with the consequences of these actions, whereas I think the woman hasn't had... all she's had is everyone saying, oh, isn't it terrible, you're completely in the right, which she is, but now she's going in the wrong. And I think people will literally just start doing bad things or going in the wrong when things are too comfortable in their life. Unironically, when it comes to, and I might do a video on this soon, when it comes to kind of communists and people like that saying, oh, it's perfectly acceptable to, shoplift and take things from shops, I genuinely don't think that they believe it's out of necessity. I think it plays into this whole, they want a bit of chaos in their lives. They want to do something bad to cause bigger issues. I genuinely think deep down that's just what they want, because their life is too easy, despite, obviously, cost of living crisis and all this. They just want an excuse to make life just that little bit worse for themselves and everyone around them. Because we got pretty close to a utopia in the 21st century, and then obviously we lived through the 2008 crash, which, in hindsight, yeah, it's horrible, people lost jobs and all that, but overall, despite the decline in the country, it's still pretty comfortable living here. It must be. That's why we get nearly 1 million immigrants a year, so it must be doing much better than the rest of the world. And yet, instead of, say, trying to get over to the next frontier and working out how to colonise Mars and terraform other planets and things like that, what are we doing instead? What are we doing instead? We're talking about basically how we can make life as hard as possible for men, because they are the worst, they are literally the devil. This is the self-imposed barrier that we have put up in the utopia. This is what feminists are doing. They don't want an easy life, they just want to hate men, basically because they've fixed all their problems and they don't like that. And they want to take it out on all men. If they didn't want to do that, they wouldn't call all men rapists. They wouldn't have people blaming men in general for not feeling safe on the street when it's a very vast minority of men who are the evil people who will either be violent to other men, which is never talked about, by the way, or who will, sexually assault women in the street or whatever. Basically, yes, unironically, I'm going a bit Andrew Tate and saying feminism has ruined men's mental health, and as you can tell, nobody likes talking about that, even though they can recognise the issues. Which I suppose is step one. That makes it quite easy as a public figure to actually point all this out. You just need to not be as much as a human trafficker as Andrew Tate, and you'll probably get somewhere. This is part of the reason Jordan Peterson's still so popular. But anyway, I think that's everything that I have for today, so Laughing at the Guardian returns tomorrow. We've got a very special guest of Callum from the Lotus Eaters coming on, so do take a look at that if you stayed around for the whole hour. And so with that, as I say, that's everything I had for you today. So as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.